While everyone is out here enjoying the 1999 update, I've went a few steps back and took a deeper look into something that was reworked previously, our beloved companions. I actually feel bad for overlooking this change for so long, because of how stupidly good they are now. The good old days of using a Smita for its charm and slapping fets on it are completely over. And when I'm talking about disgustingly strong, it's just ultra slop now. I mean, just take a look at this. This is me as Mag doing nothing else than priming a room with Nurse Shards and armor stripping the enemies. Oops. To be fair, I didn't put that much time and effort into building my companions until recently. Still neglected them, only cared for loot maxing that bullshit, right? At least until my friend Darku kept bothering me about how good the companions are. And goddammit, he was right. So a lot of the writing credits go to him. Thank you so much for helping me make this video in the first place. And believe it or not, these creatures can improve your quality of life in missions by a lot. And by improving your quality of life, I mean it's absolute slop, going as far as easily out-damaging an entire lobby if you're running bad builds.
See that's a tall order, because the Vasca's fucking... That little fucker is active.
He's doing most of the work here.
That guy is carrying.
Let's just say, the did a really great job at giving us companion weapons and universal revives. But before I yap too much, let's just get straight to the point. Starting with the Vasca kavat. I deliberately chose this one to be the first because if you understand the Vasca build, it will be a lot easier to understand how the other companions and their builds work. As you've already seen a little bit in the intro, the Vasca kavat can be turned into a self-priming nuke consisting of toxin and slash damage, while still maintaining okayish survivability. It has a very versatile nature as it works with any Warframe due to its self-sufficiency. In terms of the Vasca build itself, well, even before that, the important part of modding any companion is the order in which we mod in, because that will determine if we just deal a little bit of damage, or we nuke a room in this case. Certain companion mods basically act as abilities on them, and we want our companions to activate their abilities in a very specific order to tickle the most out of them. So let's start dissecting this build, and start with Fear Sense, Sharpened Claws, and Draining Bite. Fear Sense allows the kavat to weaken enemies within 25 meters, while buffing it for a 2x damage multiplier with an additional stagger to enemies close by, as well as a 30% chance for a knockdown to occur. Sharpened Claws will guarantee an armor strip on a target while dealing 300% additional serration damage. While Draining Bite will allow the Vasca to inflict 150% additional serration damage, as well as proccing 5 stacks of slash on an enemy. We want all 3 of these quote-unquote abilities to hit the same enemy in order to scale our damage, which we can achieve by using persistent posture on the claws, as our Vasca will start focusing only one target at a time until the focus target dies. And speaking of scaling our damage, Tandem Bond will scale our total damage by utilizing our combo count. Every hit from the claws will increase our combo count by 6, while our inflicted heavy attacks from our melees increase the companion's melee damage by 30% multiplicatively, capping at a total of 360% or a 4.6x multiplier. Contagious Bond will spread half of the inflicted status effects from one target to others in a 9 meter radius if the target is killed by the Vasca. Territorial Aggression is a hit or miss depending on the situation you're in, as the kavat stakes their territory in a 6 meter radius for a total of 15 seconds, where each second that an enemy is within its territory, they have a 30% chance to be attacked by a Shadow Kavat, which inherits all of your companion's damage bonuses, while also being able to proc Contagious Bond. This is arguably the one slot you could replace, but then again, it raises the consistency of Contagious Bond as long as you stay in one tile set. I personally keep it on since I play more endurance-based content anyways. Momentous Bond is a good transition into the survivability aspect of this build, while also giving us a random status proc which can also include a combined element. This is important for later. Its main use case is to revive the Vasca as fast as possible, with its 12-second downtime reduction on an Eximus kill. Restorative Bond will help us reduce the downtime as well by 3 seconds for each health orb you pick up, with the icing on the cake being Tech Assault, which gives the Vasca a 60% chance to ignore lethal damage, and if that gets procced, the kavat will be granted immunity for up to 4 seconds. This mainly helps with higher level content. Moving forward to the claws. As I've already said, persistent posture is necessary for the companion to hit the same enemy to properly scale its total damage. The Vasca's claws do not have the best base stats, so we have to work around that a little bit. We can do that by focusing on status with Sepsis claws. It's a great way to ensure that we will have constant status procs, while we are sacrificing our utilization of other status effects, since Sepsis claws will turn all of the non-combined elements into toxin. That means mods like Magnetic or Radon Claws will still give us the respective Magnetic or Radiation proc, even if Sepsis says otherwise. Thanks DE. Toxin is the preferred element when it comes to general DPS for the Vasca. Heat is unnecessary, we already strip armor, and its DOT also isn't the greatest here. Heat Inherit is also not worth it due to our already existing multipliers, and Electric falls short when it comes to the kavat's time to kill, which we want to be as fast as possible. Toxin's ability to bypass shields is just a lot better in this case. Precision Conditioning gives us a whopping 385% additional serration damage, while also turning any of our IPS damage into slash damage. And before you start screaming, oh but slash is dead, it really isn't. Slash has fallen out of favor because heat does its job in a more reasonably obtained way. In our case, we want high damage dots that can spread with Contagious Bond, something that is only achievable if you have more than one of set proc on an enemy. This is where Draining Bite comes in with its 5 additional slash procs. To further boost the damage, we use Maul for another 330% additional serration damage, as well as Immunity Resistance for an additional 50% status damage. We top this off with Call of the Week for an additional 240% serration damage, and another 60% serration damage for each status effect on an enemy. Swipe will let the Vasca strike 4 additional enemies on top of the focus target, while increasing its attack range by 2 meters. This will help with the amount of procs on our enemies, leading to a better spread of Contagious Bond. Like stated earlier, thanks to the fact that Sepsis Claws only affects non-combined elemental mods, we can use Magnetic Claws for slightly increased status duration, on top of the chance of having additional damage on SxccMxt units with the Magnetic proc. We finish it off by adding Shock Collar to enhance the electric dot that Magnetic can produce on an SxccMxt unit, while also just still feeding into Sepsis Claws. With that huge yap sash out of the way, the explanations will get a bit shorter from here on out, since the builds are all similar in design, so I'll just point out the big differences. Which means we're moving on to the Sly vulpaphyla.
Gangnam Style!
It will be most useful on caster frames, but they can also be a big assistance when it comes to traversal from one objective to another. Gangnam Style will work really well, as it essentially provides an additional safety layer for you. While it is alive, it will do damage in similar ways to the Vasca, but instead we no longer want to mod for survivability. That's because its on-death larva that Sly Devolution provides is actually pretty useful and even wanted to an extent, thanks to its ability to give us evasion and an AoE damage reduction whenever you kill something. This effect lasts for 8 seconds, or until you start shooting again, while more kills will reapply the evasion effect. Please note that this only applies to weapons, which means you can freestyle your ability as long as they don't provide you with an exalted weapon. And even if it is alive, we're fine with it staying alive due to its ability to reset the enemy's AI when bullet jumping with Survival Instinct. Additionally, it gives us another positive by making enemies look to where you've jumped from, which works similar to Ivara's Noise Arrow. Our DPS will be provided by the same Fear Sense and Tandem Bond combo to scale our damage, so that we can make the most out of Contagious Bond. Territorial Aggression helps the Sly to deal damage even if it dies. Hello, post-recording fact checker here. Territorial and Devolution do not synergize with each other. As soon as the kavat dies, Territorial's effect will be stripped away, and Devolution also cannot negate this. Territorial is still a decent bot to put in here, thanks to the fact that it can inherit damage and also proc Contagious. Just wanted to throw this little fix in here. Duplex Bond is kind of a free slot, since there really isn't anything else that we need, so instead I opt for survivability to make the most out of Survival Instinct. Alternatives here could include Sharpened Claws for higher damage scaling, Vicious Bond for an additional armor strip, or Tenacious Bond for an additive crit bonus. In terms of claws, we make some slight adjustments and aim for electric damage for its spreads, which is how we will get the most use out of our AoEs. For the posture mod, we can either go with Assassin's Posture or Frenzied Posture, since we want the Sly to be in constant action. Feel free to pick between the two if you either want higher status duration or higher damage against Overguard units. The rest is pretty much the same. We replace Maul with Bite as it works better in this case, and we make a better use out of Hunter Synergy instead of Call of the Week. The Crescent vulpaphyla also has more niche use cases, where you would rather want to use it for high level content with either a status spreader or a melee influence build, since Crescent Charge provides an insane amount of scaling damage. It will fling the initial target into other nearby enemies for 20% of its total HP, while also scaling multiplicatively with Tandem Bond, which means it has less chances of nuking in lower levels, but instead goes absolutely crazy in higher level content. That's due to the fact that our damage output is in fact so high that the Crescent will be killing lower level enemies before it's able to proc anything on them. It usually takes around like 700 levels before you actually start noticing how stupid the Crescent vulpaphyla is, and from there on out it's just fucking hell torture for enemies. With this setup, it can actually be possible for the Crescent to damage cap under the right conditions. Its survivability in this build is also above average than the rest, thanks to our use of Duplex Bond in addition to Tech Assault, as well as Momentous Bond and Restorative Bond. While I have to say Duplex Bond could be replaced again for additional armor strips provided by Sharpened Claws, which would only really matter if you struggle against Acolytes, for example. I personally don't, so fuck it. For the Crescent Claws, we're making use of Assassin Posture for higher damage against Overguard units, which can be pretty neat when it comes to playing level cap content. This time we make use of Maul and Bite alongside Hunter Synergy and Precision Conditioning to go all in on damage scaling, with Swipe giving us more consistency to proc Contagious Bond. Our last critter for today will be the Medjay Predasite, since he's not just the stupidest one by far, but also the most difficult to explain. The Medjay with our setup might as well be one of the highest DPS increases that you can get, outside of Prime Footed obviously, by providing us with, and I'm not making that shit up, a triple nuking setup. Big fucking damage for the sacrifice of survivability. Like, unironically, like, it's actually garbage. I mean, Kubros in general are just terrible when it comes to survivability. So yeah, this one is incapable of level capping, at least if we don't happen to abuse the actual living hell out of Oberon. Instead, the Medjay is the most useful in shorter length and lower level missions from all the companions that I've talked about so far. AKA, if you want a companion for casual gameplay, this is where you will strike gold. And quite possibly never want to swap off of it again, which I don't really recommend. Build diversity is really fun. And yes, you could argue that you can just run the Vasca kavat. True. But we gotta keep in mind that the Medjay is basically the counterpart to the Panzer vulpaphyla as a viral primer, just with the difference that instead of spreading viral, we're spreading viral gas and slash nukes across an entire tile set. And then prime viral. At least if the enemies are even still alive at that point. So it's less of a primer, but rather the actual fucking embodiment of death. So, triple nukes. Big words. What do I mean by that? Well, essentially it's just an insanely stupid synergy overload. Starting with Volatile Parasite. It will be the first mod in our build since we want to trigger its 15-second cooldown before anything else. It will latch a maggot on an enemy that can provide crowd control in similar ways to how Loki's decoy works. Because when the enemy, the maggot, latches on dice, you get a 10 meter AoE with 140% of its total damage taken, while also being capable of proccing Contagious Bond and scaling with Tandem Bond. And if the enemies in range happen to not die from the AoE, it will still apply a single viral proc on the surviving enemies. And while all of that is happening, Infectious Bite will already building up our second nuke. Infectious Bite does a finisher attack for 200% serration damage. If it fails to kill the target, 4 blobs that will be able to absorb damage spawn for a short duration before exploding in another AoE that scales with the total amount of damage taken by the blobs, which again, is capable of proccing Contagious Bond and scales with Tandem Bond. If all of that wasn't bad enough, the mecha set will additionally spread status effects in a set radius based on how many mecha mods you have equipped. In our case, it will be 2 mods, if we include the claws, for a total range value of 15 meters and a cooldown of 45 seconds. Which, again, works with Tandem Bond and works with Contagious Bond. For the claws, we either want to run Protector Posture for higher survivability and general use, or Assassin's Posture for higher damage against Overguard units. Bite will scale our gas dots with crit chance and crit damage. Mecha Overdrive will add 60% of our primary weapon status chance onto the companion status chance. Venom Teeth and Flame Gland will provide us the gas damage in question with additional status chance. Hunter Synergy will provide us with the slash procs we want on the critical hits. Maul gives us additional serration damage. And Shock Collar is just another DOT slapped on top of it with additional status chance. Top it off with additional status damage, and we got a better Saren. Mostly due to the fact that we don't have to play Saren at all. I hope you're having fun with this shit. It's pure slop, obviously, but hey, some people enjoy slop. I enjoy slop. Anyways, before we end the video, I want to announce that I'm officially selling out and I have opened a Patreon. If you decide to give me money for whatever reason, you will have access to all of the builds and scripts way before the video ever comes out. You know how hard it is for me to release a video on time. On top of that, I will also share work in progress footage for all the videos, and regularly ask there for opinions and possible improvements. Completely fucking unnecessary, by the way, because in the end you will get the video anyways. But if you want to support me, this is the way to go, since I will never unlock YouTube channel memberships due to my use of copyrighted content. Anyways, thank you for watching. This was low-key part 1 of what's to follow, so keep an eye out for a very special video up next.